Hi guys, welcome back. Today I'll talk about the Black Death. The Black Death was a devastating global epidemic of bubonic plague that struck Europe and Asia in the mid 1300s. The plague arrived in Europe in October 1347 when 12 ships from the Black Sea docked at the Sicilian port of Messina. People gathered on the docks were met with a horrifying surprise. Most sailors aboard the ship were dead, and those still alive were gravely ill and covered in black boils that oozed blood and pus. Sicilian authorities hastily ordered the fleet of death ships out of the harbor, but it was too late. Over the next years, the Black Death would kill more than 20 million people in Europe, almost one-third of the continent's population. Even before the death ships pulled into port at Messina, many Europeans had heard rumors about a great pestilence that was carving a deadly path across the trade routes of the Near and Far East. Indeed, in the early 1400s, the disease had struck China, India, Persia, Syria, and Egypt. The plague is thought to have originated in Asia over 2,000 years ago and was likely spread by trading ships. The recent research has indicated the pathogen responsible for the Black Death may have existed in Europe as early as 3000 BC. The Black Death was terrifyingly contagious. The disease was also terrifyingly efficient. People who were perfectly healthy when they went to bed at night could be dead by morning. Today, scientists understand that the Black Death, now known as the plague, is spread by a bacillus called Yersinia pestis. They know that the bacillus travels from person to person through air, as well as through the bite of infected fleas and rats. Both of these pests could be found almost anywhere in medieval Europe, but they were particularly at home aboard ships of all kinds, which is how the deadly plague made its way through one European port city after another. No one knew exactly how the Black Death was transmitted from one patient to the other, and no one knew how to prevent or treat it. Physicians relied on crude and unsophisticated techniques such as bloodletting and superstitious practices. Meanwhile, in panic, healthy people did all they could do to avoid the sick. Doctors refused to see patients, priests refused to administer last rites, and shopkeepers closed their stores. Many people fled the cities for the countryside, but even there they could not escape the disease. It affected cows, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, as well as people. Because they did not understand the biology of the disease, many people believed that the Black Death was a kind of divine punishment, retribution for sins against God. By this logic, the only way to overcome the plague was to win God's forgiveness. Some people believed that the way to do this was to purge their communities and heretics and other troublemakers. So, for example, many thousands of Jews were massacred in 1348 and 1349. Some upper-class men joined processions of flagellants that traveled from town to town and engaged in public displays of penance and punishment. They would beat themselves and one another with heavy leather straps studded with sharp pieces of metal, while the townspeople looked on. For 33.5 days, the flagellants repeated this ritual 3 times a day. Then they would move on to the next town and begin the process over again. Though the flagellant movement did provide some comfort to people who felt powerless in the face of inexplicable tragedy, it soon began to worry the Pope, whose authority the flagellants had to begin to take. In the face of this resistance, the movement disintegrated. The plague never really ended, and it returned with a vengeance years later. But officials in the port city of Ragusa were able to slow its spread by keeping arriving sailors in isolation until it was clear that they were not carrying the disease, creating social distancing that relied on isolation to slow the spread of the disease. The sailors were initially held on their ships for 30 days, a period that was later increased to 40 days, or quarantine, a practice still used today. The Black Death epidemic had run its course by the early 1350s, but the plague reappeared every few generations for centuries. Modern sanitation and public health practices have greatly mitigated the impact of disease, but have not eliminated. While antibiotics are available to treat the Black Death, according to the World Health Organization, there are still 1,000 to 3,000 cases of plague every year. That's all for this video, and I will see you next time.